The night was quiet in Santa Monica. A salty breeze drifted off the Pacific, carrying the faint hum of traffic and the clinking of restaurant dishes. Inside a pale, nondescript apartment building just 3 blocks from the ocean, a man in his 70s adjusted a houseplant on his balcony. His white hair caught the streetlight, but his eyes, those sharp, calculating blue eyes, scanned the street below, just as they had for decades. To his neighbors, he was Charles Gasco, a quiet retiree who kept to himself. He walked his dog. He paid rent in cash. He smiled politely, but that night, in June 2011, his quiet world would shatter. Because Charles Gasco wasn't a retiree. He was James Whitey Bulger, one of America's most wanted fugitives, a crime boss, an FBI informant, and a man whose name had haunted Boston for decades. For 16 years, the FBI had chased him through whispers, rumors, and dead ends. He had vanished without a trace. Until tonight. But how does a man go from ruling the streets of South Boston with blood and fear to living quietly in a California apartment as an old man? What happened during those 16 years of silence? And how did the very agency that once protected him become his greatest enemy? This is the true story of the FBI versus Whitey Bulger, the 16-year manhunt. South Boston, 1940s, a neighborhood built on loyalty, Catholicism, and working-class pride. Kids played stickball on cracked sidewalks, mothers shouted from windows, and everyone knew everyone. But among those kids was one whose eyes burned colder than the rest, James Joseph Bulger. Born into poverty, the eldest son of a struggling family, young Whitey learned early that respect wasn't given. It was taken. By his teens, he was robbing armored trucks, hijacking cars, and running small-time rackets. Locals said he was fearless, even as a teenager. Whitey was the kid who'd stare down a cop just to see what would happen, one childhood friend later recalled. In the 1950s, he joined the Air Force but couldn't escape trouble. Fights, theft, insubordination. After his discharge, he came home to Boston and straight into the city's underworld. By the time he hit his 30s, Whitey Bulger had evolved from street thug to enforcer for the Winter Hill Gang, a criminal empire that ran gambling, loan sharking, and extortion across Boston. He wasn't just violent, he was strategic. He knew when to smile and when to kill. And Boston, corrupt, conflicted Boston, was the perfect city for a man like him. But even as he built his empire, something darker was already in motion. An unholy alliance between Bulger and the FBI that would destroy lives and stain the Bureau's reputation forever. The 1970s brought a new player into Bulger's orbit, FBI agent John Connolly. Connolly had grown up in the same neighborhood as Whitey. As kids, he'd looked up to him, this local tough who seemed untouchable. When Connolly joined the FBI, Boston was in chaos. The Italian mafia, the Patriarca crime family, dominated the city's rackets. The Bureau was desperate to break them, and Connolly saw a shortcut. He approached Whitey Bulger with an offer that would change both of their lives. "You give us intel on the Italians," he said, "and we make sure you're protected." It was the devil's bargain. Bulger became an FBI informant, one of the most valuable in the country. In exchange, Connolly shielded him from prosecution. But Whitey didn't just survive under this arrangement. He thrived. While the FBI used his tips to dismantle mafia operations, Bulger used the FBI's protection to eliminate rivals. He played both sides with chilling precision. Soon, bodies started turning up. Men who'd crossed him, informants who talked, competitors who got too close. All the while, Connolly filed glowing reports on his top source. In the eyes of the Bureau, Whitey was a necessary evil. In reality, he had become a monster with a federal badge of immunity. But nothing that corrupt can last forever. And when it fell apart, it fell hard. By the late 1980s, whispers were spreading through Boston's underworld. People started to notice that anyone who crossed Whitey somehow ended up dead or arrested by the FBI. Even inside the Bureau, agents began to suspect something was wrong. Files were missing. Leads were ignored. One agent later said, "It was like chasing a ghost who knew every move we made." Then, in 1994, the walls started closing in. A federal task force finally gathered enough evidence to indict Bulger and his partner Stephen, the rifleman Flemmy, for racketeering, murder, and corruption. But before agents could move in, someone tipped him off. The night before the raids, Whitey Bulger vanished. No goodbye, no trace, no witnesses. Boston woke up to find its most feared man, and the FBI's most valuable informant, gone. The public was furious. Reporters demanded answers. How had one of America's top criminals managed to slip through the FBI's fingers? The Bureau scrambled for damage control, but the truth was darker than anyone imagined. Connolly had leaked the investigation to Bulger. The man trusted to uphold justice had just handed the devil the keys to escape. And so began one of the longest and most humiliating manhunts in FBI history. For the next decade, Whitey Bulger became a myth. Rumors placed him in London, Ireland, Mexico, even Thailand. There were alleged sightings in crowded airports, grainy photos on postcards, and whispers from prison informants. But the truth? Whitey was hiding in plain sight. Under the name Charles and Carol Gasco, he and his longtime girlfriend, Catherine Gregg, lived quietly in Santa Monica, California. They rented a modest apartment, paid cash, and kept a low profile. Neighbors described them as polite, almost invisible. They were just this sweet older couple with cats, one tenant later said. He'd wave when you passed. You'd never guess. But behind those calm blue eyes, Whitey stayed paranoid. He slept with a gun by the bed, cash buried in the walls, and weapons hidden in the ceilings. Every day he checked his surroundings. Exit routes, unfamiliar faces, cars parked too long. He was a fugitive who couldn't stop thinking like a criminal. And the FBI? They chased ghosts. Over 1,000 leads went cold. Agents retired. Files collected dust. 16 years passed. The world changed, technology, politics, even the FBI itself. But Whitey Bulger, he was still out there, waiting. In 2011, a new team of agents took over the cold case. Instead of chasing Bulger directly, they targeted the one person who'd never left his side, Catherine Gregg. She was obsessed with her hair, her beauty routines, her pets. So the Bureau launched a bold new campaign. They aired a 30-second TV spot, not about Bulger, but about her, on daytime talk shows watched mostly by older women. It was genius. Just 48 hours later, a woman in Santa Monica called the FBI hotline. "I think you're looking for my neighbors," she said. "They look exactly like that couple." Within hours, the apartment complex at 1012 3rd Street was surrounded. Agents waited until Bulger stepped outside to his garage. They moved in fast, guns drawn. He didn't resist. He just sighed, as if relieved. "Finally caught me, huh?" he said quietly. Inside the apartment, agents found $822,000 in cash, 30 firearms, and a lifetime of secrets. After 16 years, the ghost of South Boston had finally been captured. The trial of James Whitey Bulger in 2013 was unlike anything Boston had ever seen. Every day, reporters filled the courtroom. Former associates, killers, bookies, corrupt cops, lined up to testify. Bulger sat stone-faced, occasionally smirking, as prosecutors read the charges. 32 counts, including 19 murders. The evidence was overwhelming: bodies buried, ledgers, FBI files, eyewitnesses. But Bulger denied everything, insisting he was not an informant. "I gave them nothing," he growled in court. "They're the liars." For victims' families, it was a painful reckoning. Mary Callahan, whose husband was found buried in a marsh, wept as she spoke to reporters. "I just want him to know what he took from us." The jury deliberated for 5 days before delivering their verdict. Guilty on 31 counts. Whitey Bulger, once untouchable, was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms plus 5 years. As marshals led him away, one reporter shouted, "Any regrets, Whitey?" He turned, half smiling. "None," he said. "It was business." But for the FBI, it was more than business. It was a scar. The Bureau's credibility had been shaken to its core. Behind bars, Bulger remained defiant. He wrote letters to friends, critiqued his portrayal in movies, and refused to show remorse. In one note he wrote, I'm old now. They can lock me up, but they can't rewrite history. But prison was no longer his kingdom. At 89, frail and nearly blind, he was transferred to USP Hazleton, a high-security prison known for violence. Within 12 hours of his arrival, the legend of Whitey Bulger came to a brutal end. Guards found him beaten to death in his cell. His face so disfigured they had to confirm his identity through fingerprints. The attack was swift, vicious, and strangely symbolic, revenge served cold, decades later. To this day, no one has been officially charged for his murder. Some say it was a random act. Others believe it was justice from the criminal world he betrayed. Either way, the ghost of South Boston was finally silenced. In South Boston, opinions remained divided. To some, Whitey Bulger was a monster, a murderer who destroyed lives. To others, he was a twisted kind of Robin Hood, protecting locals while punishing outsiders. But the truth lies somewhere darker. He was both victim and villain, shaped by poverty, loyalty, and corruption. A man who learned to manipulate power until power consumed him. As one retired FBI agent reflected, "We thought we were using him. Turns out he was using us the whole time." Whitey's story isn't just about crime. It's about how far institutions will go when they believe the end justifies the means. It's about trust, betrayal, and the thin line between justice and corruption. And it's about a man who spent 16 years running from the law, only to be caught by his own sins. If you're still here, subscribe, because stories like this, stories of power, deception, and justice, deserve more eyes and more voices. And remember, what do you think really happened in that prison cell? Was it revenge? Was it fate? Or was it justice, finally catching up to the man who thought he could outrun it forever? As the sun sets over Boston Harbor, the city he once ruled moves on. The bars, the docks, the narrow streets, all haunted by echoes of his name. James Whitey Bulger is gone, but his story remains. A chilling reminder that power always comes at a price, and the devil always collects his debt. This is Captain Justice True Stories, and justice always finds a way.